Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. I have been told that this is the 34th session. We have started off Surah Baqarah and we have covered 224 or 223 verses to be precise. And before that, we had also covered Surah Fatiha. So this is like a long journey. But inshallah, hopefully, as long as we are able to stick to our schedule, we'll try our best to finish it if God gives us the time and the respite. So we start off where we left in our previous session. This is verse 234. It says, وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ أَرْبَعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ وَعَشْرًا فإذا بلغن أجلهن فلا جناح عليكم فيما فعلن في أنفسهن بالمعروف والله بما تعملون خبير. And those of you who die and leave wives behind, they too should keep themselves in waiting for 4 months and 10 days. Then when they have fulfilled their term, there is no blame on you about what they do with themselves in accordance with the norms, and God is well acquainted with what you do. So the first thing which becomes evident here is that as far as the iddat period of a widow is concerned, it has been increased. In the case of a divorced woman, it was 3 months, 3 menstrual cycles, but in this case, it is 4 months and 10 days. And this addition of 40 days is also quite understandable because we do not know whether that pregnancy could be established or can be established in those 3 months, especially when the time of departure of a person is someone that we simply can have no idea of. So these 40 days have been added in order to accommodate the fact that death at any instance of someone, of a husband, could be in a situation that the woman would need those additional 40 days so that the pregnancy is to be determined. So remember the iddat that we have been studying, or the divorce law that we have been studying in Surah Baqarah in these previous verses. They tell us, and as well as a complete surah of the Quran called Surah Talaq, the 65th surah, which is devoted to this issue. It tells us that the basic reason of iddat, or to observe iddat, is of course to determine whether the wife or the widow is, or the either the widow or the divorced lady is pregnant or not. And in the case of pregnancy, of course, the iddat will extend to childbirth. However, in case there is no pregnancy, then there is no need to observe iddat at all. In this case, as you can see, for a woman who is living with her in-laws, the Quran has said that, well, she has to observe these limits of 4 months and 10 days, and she should not marry in this time. And this marriage, of course, is something which is only prohibited when there is a chance that she could be pregnant or the pregnancy is to be determined. However, as I just said, that if it is absolutely certain and a doctor can certify that there is no pregnancy, then she does not need to observe any iddat, which means that she can marry again whenever she wants to. Obviously, the natural impact of losing a husband in this case is something which will take its natural toll, and as a result, that marriage would be dependent on the circumstances that she's going through. But legally, if there are such circumstances that she needs immediate support and she needs someone who could support her and comfort her, and there is someone there, then legally and Sharia wise, there is nothing which goes against it if she marries him. As I said, if the pregnancy issue is absolutely resolved and it is certain that she is not pregnant. ولا جناح عليكم فيما عرضتم به من خطبة النساء أو أكننتم في أنفسكم علم الله أنكم ستذكرونهن ولكن لا تواعدوهن سرا إلا أن تقولوا قولا معروفا ولا تعزموا عقدة النكاح حتى يبلغ الكتاب أجله واعلموا أن الله يعلم ما في أنفسكم فاحذروه واعلموا أن الله غفور حليم. And there is also no blame on you if you tacitly send a marriage proposal to those women or hold it in your hearts. God knows that you would definitely talk to them. Do so, but do not make a secret promise in this. Indeed, you can say something in accordance with the norms, and do not tie the knot of marriage until the law reaches its term. of course, which means until the iddah is expired, and she should not tie the knot. And bear in mind that God knows what is in your hearts, so fear Him, and keep in mind that God is forgiving, He is forbearing. So, in this regard, we know that as the Quran has just said, that if a person wants to marry a widow, then it is according to the norms that he make up his mind during her waiting period, or inform her of his intentions in a very tacit manner. But it is not permitted that he, without considering the sentiments of the affected family, send forth a marriage proposal to the widow or make some hidden agreement with her. On such occasions, whatever is said must never exceed the bounds of sympathy and expressing condolences. So the verses forewarn a person that since God fully knows what he will definitely express his intention in such a situation, it should not be in the form of a marriage proposal or some hidden or open agreement. The intention should be expressed in a manner that is befitting to the situation and in accordance with the norms of the society. So once the waiting period expires or the iddat expires, a person can decide to marry such a lady. At that time, he cannot be blamed in any way. So the important thing is that during this iddat period, he must not make any hidden agreement, or he should not send any marriage proposal, because of course this is the time of mourning for the family. And once the iddat period expires, yes, that he can go forth. But during the iddat period, he should just do what is according to the norms of the society and just express his intention. So intention is something else, but sending a proposal or doing something which is not at all seemly in this situation should not be done in any way. And that is why the Almighty says, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ فَاحْذُرُوهُ. So God knows what is in your heart, so fear Him. And keep in mind that God is forgiving, He is very forbearing. So if it is in your heart to marry that lady, then of course that has to be done in a very in a very austere way. It should not in any way affect that mourning period. So, لا جناح عليكم إن طلقتم النساء ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة ومتعوهن على الموسع قدره وعلى المقتر قدره متاعا بالمعروف حقا على المحسنين. And there is no blame on you in the matter of dower if you divorce women before touching them or before having fixed their dower. But this should definitely be the case, that you bestow on them some resources of life according to the norms. When you send them off, the high status according to their means, and the high in status according to their means, and the poor according to theirs. This is an obligation on those who are thorough. Of course, this is something which is a very befitting uh, advice from the Quran, that if you have, you've not paid the dower and you have divorced women before touching them, then and the dower has not been fixed. But in that case, even in that case, it is befitting for the person who has tied the marriage, not of course the husband, that he should still give something to the wife. And then the Quran says that this responsibility is not something which should be a burden on you. A person who is of means should give this dower or this amount, even if it is not fixed, and some amount, whatever he can do. And the one who has the means should do it according to his means, and the one who does not have any means, or he's restricted or constrained, then whatever he can afford. So alal musi qadaruhu wa alal muqtari qadaruhu. In talaqtumuhunna. Now these are the details of the previous verse. It says, in tamassuhunna min qabli an tamassuhunna wa qad faradtum lahunna farida fa nisfu ma faradtum illa an ya'funa aw ya'fu wallazi biyadihi uqdatun nikah wa an ta'fu aqrabu littaqwa wa la tansaw al-fadla baynakum inna allaha bima ta'maluna basir. But if you divorce them before touching them, yet after the fixing of a dower for them, then half of this fixed dower should be given to them, unless they forego it or he forgoes it, in whose hands is the marriage not. And it is nearer to piety that you men forego your right, and do not forget your superiority among yourselves. Indeed, God is observing what you are doing. So, the detail here is that there is no blame in the matter of dower if women before they are being touched and before their dower has been fixed. But this should definitely be the case, that the husbands should bestow on them some resources of life according to the norms when they are sent off. And obviously, this is what the Quran has said. But if the divorce is such that, if you divorce and if husbands divorce their wives before touching them, yet after fixing of the dower for them, then half of this fixed dower should be given to them, unless they forego it or he forgoes it, in whose hands is the marriage not. So obviously, this is something which the Quran has made a point to tell us, that the husbands should not forget that as far as they are concerned, they have this. They are on the giving side. The Quran says, "Biyadihi uqtatul nikah." They are the people who have tied the knot. So in this case, even if this situation is such that they have divorced them, the dower has been fixed, and but they have not been, any sexual intimacy between them, then the Quran says then half of this dower should be given to them. But it actually urges them that if they give the full dower, it would be even better. حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقوموا لله قانتين فإن خفتم فرجالا أو ركبانا فإذا أمنتم فاذكروا الله كما علمكم ما لم تكونوا تعلمون. This is the Sharia of God. If you want to remain steadfast on it, be watchful over your prayers, especially the one which comes in the middle of the morning and evening prayers, when it is not easy for you to take out time from your involvements, and stand before God devoutly, leaving aside everything. Then, if you fear any danger, pray on foot or while riding, in whichever way you like. But when circumstances become secure, remember God in the very manner He has taught you, which you knew not. So the important point here is that here on verse 239, the third section of the surah ends. We know that the surah has an introduction, it has sections, and then it has a conclusion. Here ends the third section. This was the section in which the believers were given directives of the Sharia, and you can clearly see that this section, which ends on these verses, it actually ends on the directive of the prayer. And this actually underscores the importance of the prayer. It tells us the significance the prayer has, because the whole Sharia is actually something which sprouts from this commitment with God, and the expression of this commitment is something which is espoused in the prayer. So it says, Hafizu ala salawati was salatil wusta, that as believers you have to protect your prayers, especially the middle one. If you look at the middle one, of course, we know that this is the Asr prayer, which the Quran especially said, because it comes in between activities. It's a time in which you are wrapping up something and maybe beginning a new routine of that day, and it's a time that you might miss that prayer, or you might delay it unnecessarily. So the Quran has warned us. It's given us this advice that you must protect all your prayers, which means that you must protect their timings. You must pray on time, especially the middle prayer, which is the Asr prayer, because this is the prayer that you might take easy. It's a short one. You just need to pray the 4 rakat, and at times you just procrastinate, and at times you think that you have enough time, but it might swiftly go away. So it's always better to plan your day in a way that you know that the Asr prayer would not in any way be missed. And then another very important thing which the Quran has said here is that فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا, that if you fear any danger or anything which makes your prayer to be under compulsion, that you might miss it, then the Quran says that you can pray while you are even walking, which says فَرِجَالًا أَوْ رُكْبَانًا, or you're riding, or you're on a conveyance. So even in such cases, that if the prayer comes in a time when you know that you'll miss the prayer, and you are maybe walking in a bazaar or a market, or maybe walking somewhere else. Similarly, you might be on your car or your bike, maybe, or your aeroplane, whichever conveyance you are on. The Quran says if the time of the prayer arrives, then you can pray while you are walking, and you can pray while you are riding. And of course, in such a case, the directive of facing the Qibla is not something that has to be obeyed. Whatever the direction that you are going, that would be sufficient. And obviously, the utterances of the prayer would remain the same, but the form of the prayer would be compromised while you're walking. Of course, you would not be doing all those the parts that we have to do, the section that we have to perform as far as our bodily gestures are concerned. Same is the case with while we are riding a bike, or maybe a horse, or maybe on a plane. On all such circumstances, and in all circumstances, whatever is possible would be done. But it goes without saying that such is the importance of the prayer, that the Almighty does not want us to miss it, even when we are in a position when we are not able to pray the way we should pray. We are given this concession, but we are told that we should not in any way miss the prayer. So such is the importance of this worship ritual. And then we see that there is another directive which relates very connectedly, I would say, to what has been said earlier on. And the words are, وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا وَصِيَّةً لِأَزْوَاجِهِمْ مَتَاعًا إِلَى الْحَوْلِ غَيْرَ إِخْرَاجٍ فَإِنْ خَرَجْنَ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِيمَا فَعَلْنَ فِي أَنفُسِهِنَّ مِنْ مَعْرُوفٍ وَاللَّهُ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. And yes, there is something else that requires explanation regarding the directives given to you about widows and divorced women. And what is that? Those of you who die and leave behind wives should bequeath for those wives a year's provision, and also that in this period they shall not be turned out of the house. But if they themselves leave the house, then there is no sin on you for what they do with themselves according to the norms. This is the law of God, and God is powerful. He is very wise. So, what is said here, of course, is something that has to be understood as well. And that is that these are the directives which needed some more explanation. And both these verses, it seems, are appended to the last verses of the section as an end note. It's like an appendix, so that it becomes evident from their very placement that they were revealed after the original directive as their explanation. And this is also clear from the words which say that thus God does explain his verses to you. So it does happen in the Quran when certain directives finish, and questions still arise. Maybe they are in the air, maybe they are in the minds. So as an addendum, the Quran, the Almighty addresses these issues, and at times they are placed right after the section which finishes, and at times they are placed a little later. And we'll see these examples in the surahs coming as well. But here you can see that as soon as that section had ended on the prayer, it seemed that there's something else that also required explanation, and that is given here. And that is that if a person dies, then he should actually make this arrangement. I mean, everyone has to die, of course. So every husband has this responsibility that for 1 year, he must arrange that the maintenance that he gives to his wife and the residence that he gives to his wife should stay arranged for his wife after 1 year of his demise. And she should in no way be turned out of the house, unless, of course, she herself wants to go out, or maybe after the period expires, she would like to marry someone. That is another case. But if she would like to stay, then the Quran says that it is the responsibility of the husbands that they should write a will, that once I pass away, my wife shall be given 12 months of pocket money, whatever money that you are giving your wife as her maintenance. And this should continue from whatever wealth you are leaving behind for 1 year. And also for 1 year, she must be given that residence, unless, of course, she comes out of it herself for any other reason. And I would also like to explain this, that this is one directive which is a forgotten directive. Most husbands, if not all, they perhaps do not pay attention, or maybe this directive or this verse of the Quran has eluded them. But it is very important that every single person, he makes this will. He must write down this will, that after I pass away, I will be responsible to give 12 months of maintenance money to my wife and 12 months of residence to my wife. And all his heirs must be told that this is something that he has written, and it must be honored. وَلِلْمُطَلَّقَاتِ مَتَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. And similarly, this explanation is also necessary, that divorced women should in all cases be given some resources according to the norms when they are sent off. This is an obligation on those who are fearful of God. God in this manner explains his revelations to you in order that you may understand. So once again, we know that there is another verse of the Quran which is appended to the previous section, which means that as far as this section is concerned, we know that the previous section, the verses which form the conclusion verses, we can say, just before the prayer verse is stated to underscore its importance, are the verses which deal with divorce. So here it is stated that whenever you send off your wives at the time of their divorce, mata'um bil ma'ruf, you must give them something with which is according to the norms of the society. And the Quran actually says, haqqan alal muttaqeen. This is an obligation to those who are fearful. So giving something to your wives who you have divorced at the time of divorce, giving something extra to them is what the Quran says is an obligation which is imposed on the husbands. And in lieu of this, under this, a parliament, legislative body can act even a law which would bound a husband in any way that after his own departure, if his wife is not being looked after by anyone and she is left high and dry, then a certain amount of money would be given to her until a certain amount of time so that she can stand on her feet. So this is also something that can be enacted under this very verse. And again, we see the Quran says that God in this manner explains his revelations to you in order that you may understand, telling us that these are the explanatory verses that have been appended to the last section. In fact, the section, which is the third section of the surah, ends here. And from here onwards, or the next verse, which is verse 243, we'll find an entirely different scenario being discussed in this surah regarding the Israelites, but that is something we shall take up, inshallah, next time. So we'll start off the literal and the idiomatic translation of these verses. But before we do that, if you have any questions regarding what we have just studied in today, then please raise them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The first question asks, would making your wife the beneficiary of the husband's life insurance policy be acceptable for the 1 year of nafqa and shelter?
Well, if it is sufficient to take care of her. I mean, life insurance policies, they don't give a monthly stipend, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, they get matured after a certain period of time, and then the money is dispersed. So this is just an entirely different scenario. It says that for 12 months, for 1 year, she should be given her maintenance. I mean, for 12 months, whatever need that she has, it could be given on a monthly basis, or it could be given in a lump sum. But that is an amount that must be given to her at the time of the husband's death.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Shabnam, please go ahead.
थैंक यू मरियम सर ये जो 12 मंथ्स के मेंटेनेंस की आयत है सर मुझे कोई अंडरस्टैंडिंग थी कि गालिबन ये शुरू में थी ये हुक्म था फिर ये मंसूख हो गई थी क्योंकि अल्लाह ताला ने वाइफ का हिस्सा रखा है सर तो फिर ये मेंटेनेंस अलहदा से उसके लिए
This is a separate thing, and you are right that there are many exegetes who think that this verse has been abrogated by the inheritance verse, but there is no evidence for this. This is an entirely different thing, and actually this stems from the position of the husband as the head of the family, that he is required to maintain his wife not only when she's living, but also when he himself passes away for 1 year, so that she can make sufficient arrangements for herself in that 1 year, in which she can stand on her feet and do something for herself. This is besides the inheritance amount that he has to give her.
Thank you, sir. Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Imran, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. Thank you very much for the explanation. So I have a quick question on the idda or the iddat for either a divorced woman or a widowed lady. So if the main reason is to rule out pregnancy,
right,
then of course the divorced one, we're going to wait for 3 periods, and we say for the widowed 40 days. But but what about postmenopausal women? So that's my first part of my question. Because if the sole reason is to ascertain pregnancy, it would not come into question when they are postmenopausal. The second question Of course, we say,
Let me answer the first question.
Sure, sure.
So I have already, I think, alluded to this in our earlier session that if it is, attested by a doctor and he can tell you that there is no chance of any pregnancy and she is also not pregnant, then there is no need to observe the iddat at all. So which means actually that she can marry someone immediately after or whenever she would want to. There would be nothing which bounds her not to marry. The only thing that would bound her is if she's pregnant, and in that case, her iddat would extend until the childbirth, and that is all.
So does the Quran say that is the only reason why they have to wait? I know in the divorced woman, I read it, but today I forgot to check. I know you were mentioning, but in the widowed is the same thing?
It is exactly the same thing. You see, it's analogously, it would be understood to be the same thing, because you see, the situation has, not changed. The only change that has occurred is that in the first case, the separation was such that the two were living. In the second case, you still, separated. The only thing is the husband has passed away. So the directives of divorce will stand likewise for divorced women. For women who become widows. The only exception is the amount or the extent of iddat, which will be, as I said, 40 days more, which the Quran has just specified, than the divorced women.
I see. I know one of the sisters had asked about the 1 year of like the lodging and the provisions for the widowed. I think, for the widowed. But what about in Islam? Is because the most of the inheritance goes to the sons, because they are to look after their mothers and the ladies of the home, and so but the women get in addition to that extra.
Yes, that is it. Not all husbands, not all sons, in spite of wanting to be, are in a position to always support their mothers. They could be poor as well. They could be in need as well. So you see, the Quran has made this special provision from the wealth of the husband. That it's like an extension of his being the head of the family, who provides resources for the wife and the children. So it is said that during his lifetime, of course, he is financially responsible. But even when he passes away, for 1 year, he's still financially responsible for his wife.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you. Akram Bhatti, please go ahead.
Sir, it's about, I'm asking about elderly people, who are, elderly, 70 plus, and his wife's around same age. And parents have passed away, and she has, nowhere to go. And there's no likelihood that she's going to get married. So can a husband write a will that as long as she is alive, she would be, she would be given all the, all my pension or whatever the living.
Yes, I do. I understand your question. What you're asking is that because there are certain scenarios in which there is no place for a woman to go, then yes, he can make this will. He can write this down, that as long as my wife is living, she will live in the house that I'm leaving behind, and the inheritance will be distributed once she passes away.
Yes, that was my question. Thank you very much.
That is correct.
Okay. Danish Ibrahim, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mariam. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem.
Wa alaikum salam.
Just wanted a small clarification here. If a woman is not postmenopausal, she's a young woman, and considering the technological advancement we have right now, if it could be ascertained that the woman is in fact not pregnant, it seems to mean that the is not mandatory to be followed.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I just said. Even if she's not postmenopausal, but even if she is a woman who menstruates, but it is known that she's not pregnant, and it is certified by a doctor that she is not pregnant, then she can, whenever she would like to, she has the jurisdiction, she has the authority to marry. There is no, she is not bound to observe the iddat period in any way. And as I said, that this is something which is corroborated by the Quran very specifically. In Surah Ahzab, there is a verse which says that if you marry women and you divorce them without having intimacy, if you marry women and you divorce them without having intimacy, there is no iddat period. which means that, of course, the primary reason for that iddat period is whether that lady is pregnant or not. Otherwise, there was no reason that the Quran would have said this.
Got it, sir. So what's the significance of that ruling, wherein Allah specifically commands the believers, you shouldn't be giving out, you shouldn't be sending out your sending out proposal during this period.
So,
If
yes, I understand. So you see, this is very obvious that a house, that the lady who is living with the in-laws and they are in a state of mourning, and you would like to marry that woman, it's not proper that in this period of that she be given this marriage proposal. Yes, some very tacit intention could be expressed, but making a secret agreement with her or maybe sending a marriage proposal is against those sentiments, which I mean, it would violate the sanctity of those sentiments which the household of the departed person are going through. So they are in a state of mourning, and suddenly they receive this marriage proposal for their daughter-in-law, so to speak. That would be against their. I mean, it's like something that would deeply have an impact on them. So it's just like respecting their emotions. That the Quran has said that if you want to marry a widowed lady or a widow, then please wait for the iddat period to finish. And if you need to tell her that you would like that, I mean, you like to proceed, then all that you can do is just give that tacit approval, I mean, tacit communication of their intention.
So as it has been established that in our current time, but due to the technological advancement that we have, if it is ascertained the very next day that the woman is not pregnant and the period
Yes.
need not be observed, then
Yeah,
you can
that not be
still
observed.
still
No,
send
no.
out a proposal.
Yes,
And
that is correct, because this proposal issue is the one in which she is observing her iddat period. I mean, this is the time. I mean, this is related to the scenario in which the iddat has to be observed, and it is still not certain whether she's pregnant or not. However, if it is certain that she is not pregnant, and in that case, this is not the ruling. In that case, of course, she can marry the very next day. And these particular verses actually relate to that scenario in which she is properly observing the iddat.
okay, got it. Just one question, if I'm allowed to do. So
Right?
I still didn't quite understand the significance of Allah mentioning the importance of safeguarding the middle prayer, and I think it felt like it just came all of a sudden. And from a very from a Nazmul Quran point of view, how does it
Right.
relate to the previous passage and the passage after that?
So you see, I've tried to explain this, and you'll get this feel when you go through the rest of the Quran also, that there are verses which are at times appended at the end of a section, and one of the reasons for that appendix, I would say, or that addendum, if I use the correct word, is to actually highlight the significance of a certain directive. And this happens, and this has happened at other instances in the Quran also, that when it gives certain directives, those directives seem to end on a particular part of the Sharia, which the Almighty wants to highlight that this is especially the case, that you must observe this. So the prayer has this importance, and you'll find that if you need to look up an example, you can see Surah Mawrid, for example. It starts off the directive with the prayer at a certain instance, a certain paragraph. It's a shorter surah, you can just look it up. And as soon as that section ends, you'll see that once again, like a circle which encircles those directives, the prayer is once again mentioned, as if the prayer as if the Sharia starts with the prayer and it ends with the prayer, and it's like a protective boundary wall which encircles all those directives. So you can look up Surah Ma'arij and see that. So on a similar note here also, although the section did not start off with the prayer, but it started off with a number of things. It include, for example, we know that the fast was discussed, we know jihad was discussed, we know infaq was discussed, we know alcohol and women who are menstruating, divorce, all these directives were discussed one after the other. But the end was, I mean, once again, the end came on a directive which to the Sharia was of very, very foundational significance, and that is why the prayer was mentioned there.
Thank you. Asif Ali, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab. So
Walaikum
my
salam.
question is like basically on an overall concept of the divorce, because what we are studying here is that divorce is a very important topic, and in Islamic Sharia, if divorce is happening, a lot of issues have to be settled, like property and the days after which a woman can marry or not. So my question is that is like an advice given to the Muslim men or women, or is any society like in US or any Pakistan, a law has to be made to safeguard all these things according to the Quran directives?
You see, I mean, this is a law which the Quran has already made. So, in case of any, you can say, violation of the law, it is here that you have recourse to the state, or you file for a complaint. Otherwise, this is something which is already acceptable. I mean, already accepted in Muslim countries. However, in non-Muslim countries, or people who are living outside of these Muslim countries, you can follow the law of the land, and you'll see that that law of the land, I mean, has those provisions in which your own Sharia law can be incorporated.
Because in US, the law of the land is that in any divorce, you have to go to the court. You have to file a divorce, and then the decree is issued.
It is the same in Muslim countries as well. The divorce has to be filed. It's not something that should be going on between a husband and a wife in a private way. It's a public matter. So even in Muslim countries, this is something which is a legal matter in which you have to go to a court of law. There is a whole procedure laid out for it. You have to serve a notice, and then that notice is accepted, and then a court pronounces that, or there is a certain authority which pronounces that, and then it is actually registered in Nadra, which is a authority here, which actually identifies you as an individual or a citizen, and it is updated. Your record is updated that previously you were married and now you're divorced. So all this procedure is something which is found in all countries. I mean, it's not just the US or the UK; it's everywhere.
So intention of the Quran is that the Muslim society have to make the laws, and because it's a public domain area.
I mean, all Muslim societies, all Muslim countries, even today, have these laws already made. I mean, you don't need to feel concerned in any way that they are not made. They're already in place.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We have quite a few chat questions too. So the first one asks, if a wife doesn't pay her sexual obligations to her husband and then asks for khula, does she lose everything, the dower and gifts, etc.?
Certainly not. Certainly not. And I think I've explained this in our last session, that if she seeks divorce, I mean, she has an equal right to divorce. The only difference is that she would ask the husband to divorce her. She would not lose anything. Not a single thing. All the dower is something which is already her. I mean, whatever dower was contracted between the two is her right already. And even the gifts which the husband has given to her is her right. They need not to be returned. There's just one exception, or in fact two exceptions, where the Quran has mentioned, and it does not take into account the dower. That is an inalienable part of the wife's wealth. It has become part of the wealth. It just says that the gifts that the husband has given, he can take them. He should not take them back, except on two exceptional bases. One of them is if the wife is guilty of adultery, and the second one is if both husband and the wife, they want to divorce, but the husband is not divorcing the wife because he has gifted so much assets to the wife that he would think that he would lose a lot of those things when he divorces his wife. So in such a case, the wife is being told that if she releases herself by giving part of those assets, or maybe all of them, then it would not be any sin for the husband to accept them. So this is a very specific scenario in which both of them want to separate, but the only reason that they are not separating is that the husband is gifted a lot of assets and wealth. Other than that, if there's a normal divorce which is taking place, then she, of course, the dower is out of question. That is already her right. So even the gifts that the husband has given her, that they have become a right. And in normal circumstances, they should not be taken back.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, in a joint family system, women in the house, like mother-in-laws or sister-in-laws, create hell for the widow and lock her up in her room, especially when there are other men at home. So how do you go on about this?
Well, I think this is a very specific scenario, and if the person who's asked this question would need specific advice, it would entail a lot of information, which of course, I mean, obviously in such a in this public sort of a lecture might not be easy for the person to communicate that or to divulge that. So if she could get in touch, or he could get in touch with me on a personal basis, I would be more in a position to advise. And of course, I would need some more information as well, because that's a hypothetical situation which arises in many cases, in many in many households, that the heirs of the husband, they make a hell for the unfortunate widow, or whatever you can call that situation. So I think that would be more convenient if she gets in touch with me personally.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, do you have any mourning period guidance for widows?
So you see, you don't need to be given any guidance when you are mourning. It's such a natural thing. And when you are grieving for someone, you are grieving for the loss of your husband. What will you do? I mean, it just comes naturally. When I feel grieved that someone has passed away, someone that I really loved, someone who's really connected to me and I to him or her, that grievance that I would feel would be so natural that there would be certain things that I would be doing and there were certain things that I would not be doing. So I think it's so natural that it should be governed by those natural emotions. But one thing that I'd like to point out here is that even when you're grieving for someone, this does not mean that you shut yourself off from the society or you start, secluding yourself, because that would be even more detrimental. That isolation would, in fact, take its toll as well. So, for example, in spite of grieving, if a lady goes out, let's say to some wedding or maybe to a park to have a walk, to some fun place to divert her attention, or to do any other activity, that is not something which is going to in any way go against that mourning, because you see, you're not mourning 24 hours. In fact, you need that diversion from that mourning, and for that you need to do all sorts of activities, going to the office, going to the school, maybe if you're a teacher, or going for any recreation. So all this, if a lady does that, it does not mean that she's undermining the waiting period or the mourning period in any way, because you see, that's her psychological need as well, that she should try to come back to normalcy, to come back to life as now she would have to face.
And the participant is asking, how long can this period continue for her?
As long as she would like to. I mean, it depends from person to person. And there are some people who are able to get over their emotions, they are able to control them, they come back to the normalcy of life soon. There are others who take long, and still others who take very long. So I think this is something which depends from case to case and from person to person. You don't have a law for that. It is something, I mean, there is a general guidance, and that is that a person should accept God's decision, that because something has been done, it cannot be undone. So God does not want you to become emotionless. Yes, of course, you are. Every person feels that loss, but the guidance that we are given in general is that we should accept this as a reality and try to move on in life.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I had a question too regarding the dowry. So I thought the whole point of that was to show that the man is capable of taking care of the wife or the woman that he's going to marry. So, and now we have the directive that even after marriage, if the dower has not been set. So I'm a bit confused. Why is it not set before marriage?
Yes. So you see, at times this happens. You see, this is not a normal case. Dowers have to be settled. I mean, what happens is that at times it's sort of said that, okay, I'll give the dower, but the amount is not settled. So you can say that the commitment that has been made is that the dower should be paid or would be paid, but the amount at times is left out. So yes, you're absolutely right that if the dower has to be paid in all circumstances, then why should this scenario arise that if the dower has not been fixed? So this is like an exceptional circumstance, that at times you give this verbal sort of commitment, but the amount is something that is still like in a fluid state. So in that case, it is said that whatever dower will be ultimately fixed. If you've not touched that, if you've not had intimate relations, then you should give half that amount. So you see, in that case also, the dower is actually, there is something which has been fixed. So you have to be given, or the wife has to be given half the amount. And in fact, the Quran urges that it is better if you give the whole amount.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We have another chat question that's asking, shouldn't the mourning period not be more than 3 days as explicitly directed by Prophet Muhammad?
So that is for normal circumstances. I mean, that mourning period is in which you are going to do nothing at all and you're just going to receive the condolences. You see, a mourning period has a lot of diversity in it. One sort of mourning is that you are just receiving condolences and you do nothing at all. You're just sitting at home and receiving people who are coming in to condole to you. So that is three days. But other than that, I mean, if you are coming back to work, that 3 days could be exceeded. I mean, because you see, you're still doing that work, but that state of mourning is still with you. It's like you're going to the office, but you're still your mind is still stuck up. So you see, one thing is that you resume your activities, but that mourning period continues with those activities. But in those first 3 days, what the Prophet's advice is that if you give up everything from doing everything, you just sit and receive people, then that is fine. But on the fourth day, I mean, it's just like a general advice, of course. 3 days does not mean exact 3 days. It could be 4 or 5 as well. What the Prophet has actually said is that it is advisable that you come back to your routine in life as soon as possible. But once you come back to the routine in life, even then you can have that morning sensation. So I was talking about that sensation and feeling which stays even later on. So that is something that is, that would stay with you as long as you have that emotional attachment, and you should be in a position to try to go back to work as soon as possible. So these are two different scenarios.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Adil Qureshi, please go ahead.
So somewhat related question to this. So usually 40 days after the husband has died, has passed away, there is another ceremony in which people gather again and then they try to read Quran. Does this practice find its source in the Sunnah of Prophet, or did this happen, or should Muslims do that, or some people
Not at
say
all.
this is
This is something which is a addition made in religion, and the primary purpose of this gathering is that when they read the Quran, they'll transfer the reward that they gain from reading the Quran to the departed soul. So this transfer of reward is something which is alien. It's an alien concept vis-a-vis the Quran. The Quran says, "Laysa lil insani illa ma sa'a." A person will get in the hereafter only what he himself has earned in this world. So this transfer of reward concept, or reading the Quran and transferring its reward to a departed soul, is a much later practice. It never happened in the time of the Prophet. As I said, the Quran does not condone it, and it should be avoided at all cost.
Imran, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Dr. Saleem, just quick question on just following up on this question, transferring of the reward. Then why is that people go to Umrah to Mecca and they do Umrah for their deceased parents? I know you can't do fasting for them. You cannot pray for the deceased, but then you can do Umrah, and then some people do even Hajj for their parents and stuff who died.
I think in my understanding, I always have thought of this, and they have said that, well, once a person who was not able to do Hajj or Umrah, he had the full intention, or she had the full intention, and either the means were not there, or the health was not there, or anything was missing, then the reward of that Hajj and Umrah is already in his or her pocket. It accrues in the account. So personally, I am not in this favor that people should go and do Hajj and Umrah on behalf of other people, because that is something that they have already done as far as their intention is concerned.
What if someone's parents have already done that, but they just happen to now go and they want to give extra reward? I know they can pray for them, but then some people are in a habit of actually doing Umrah on their behalf, and like you said, passing
as
on
I said, as I said, that these worship rituals, they are related to the person himself or herself, and unless there is an issue of a vow, for example, someone had made a vow that he or she would do Hajj, or made a vow that if something was fulfilled, or his desire or her desire was fulfilled, then she would or he would do observe certain number of fasts. So if there is a vow or a commitment made to God, then that is one thing that the Prophet has said, that is like a loan that has been borrowed and you have to return the loan. So unless there is a commitment, special commitment, that I'm going to specifically fast or specifically go to Hajj for this purpose, so yes, that is now an outstanding sort of a loan on the heirs. In that case, that is something else and should be dispensed with. But in normal circumstances, I don't see any reason for that.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Let's move on, and because we're running short here on time, and then we have the last 10 minutes reserved for general.
Inshallah. So let's start off with the literal and idiomatic translation of the verses, starting off with verse 224. It says, وَلَا تَجْعَلُوا اللَّهَ أُرْضَةً لِأَيْمَانِكُمْ أَن تَبَرُّوا وَتَتَّقُوا. Wa and la not. تَجْعَلُوا, you make. Allah, Allah. Urdatan, target. Li'aymanikum, for your oaths. So ayman is the plural of yameen, and yameen means an oath. So ayman is the plural. So it means that do not make your oaths. Do not make God a target of your oaths. Here, actually, the word target refers to to hindrance or obstacle. So do not make God an obstacle to your oaths. And what does that mean? It is explained subsequently. And that tabarru, you act loyally. Wa, and tattaqu, you act within the limits of God. Wa, and tuslihu. Tuslihu means that uh, you make peace among people, you reform people. Aslaha yuslihu, tuslihu means to reform people. Baina, between. Annas, of course, is people. So, idiomatically, the translation would be that do not make God a hindrance to your oaths so that you act loyally or you act in the limits of God and that you create uh, order and peace between people. Wallahu Samiun Alim, Va, and Allah, God, Sami, who hears, Alim, who is knowledgeable. So, we've already discussed this verse when we were studying these verses, that it actually means that if you have sworn by God to do something which is not good, then this should not be a cause of not doing that good. You can break that oath, and then what you can do is that you should deal loyally with people. You should deal them within the limits which God has created. And watuslihu bainan nas, and in that case, if there's the need that you should reform affairs between people, then that should also be done. So reforming people and being acting within the limits of God, if this is the objective, then this should not be in any way stopped. You should not withdraw or withhold from it simply because you have sworn the name of God not doing it, or you have sworn again on oaths that you will not do these things. So that is what this verse says. La yu'akhizukumullahu bil-laghwi fi aymanikum. La, not. Yu'akhizukum would mean does not hold you accountable. Does not hold you accountable. Allah, God. So la yu'akhizukumullah, God will not hold you accountable. Bil-laghwi fi aymanikum. Ayman is the same ayman that we have just discussed in our first verse. So it's the plural of yameen, which means oath. Bil-lagh means something which is nonsensical. Of course, here it refers to the fact that you do swear your oaths inadvertently, unintentionally. So, la yu'akhizukumullahu bil-laghwi fi aymanikum would idiomatically mean that God will not hold you accountable. God will not hold you accountable for those oaths that you swear unintentionally, in which you just do it out of frenzy or, momentarily, but you don't have any intent. Walakin, but yu'akhizukum, he will hold you accountable. Bima, what? Kasabat, earned. Kulubukum, your hearts, which means that God will hold you accountable for what your hearts have earned. So qulub is the plural of qalb, and of course kasabat means to earn what your hearts have earned. Of course, it metaphorically means that what your hearts intend to do. So in other words, this is like a comparison which the Quran is making, that oaths which are sworn unintentionally, in which you don't have any intent, God will not hold you accountable for those oaths. وَلَكِنْ يُؤَخِذُكُمُ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ قُلُوبُكُمْ, but He will hold you accountable for the oaths which your hearts make intentionally, in which you are deliberately doing something. You know what you're doing. Wallahu ghafurur rahim. Wa, and Allah, God, ghafur, forgiving, halim, forbearing, and God is forgiving and forbearing. Lillazina, for those. Le, it's actually le allazina, but when you write it in one word, the alif is dropped and you say lillazina. Lillazina would mean for them. Yu'luna min nisa'ihim, who swear to abstain from their wives. So ila, basically, as I explained already, it was an oath which was sworn in the pre-prophetic times, or before the arrival of the Prophet in the Arab society, in which a husband would swear that he will not have any sexual contact with his wife. So, لِلَّذِينَ يُؤْلُونَ مِن نِسَائِهِم would mean that for those who swear an oath of abstinence from their wives, tarabbusu arba'ati ashhur. Tarabbus means a respite, a period. Arba'ati ashhur means 4 months. So for those who swear an oath to sever relations, sexual relations with their wives, there is a respite of 4 months. In other words, they are just given these 4 months in which they must make up their mind. So it says, فَإِن فَاءُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Therefore, in is if. Fa'u, they change their mind, return. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ, therefore, indeed, Allah is God, Ghafoor is forgiving, Rahim is merciful. So, if they change their mind, then indeed God is merciful, which means this is what God wants a person to do, that if he has severed his if he's decided to sever relations with his wife and he's given these 4 months, then in those 4 months, if he withdraws, he takes it back, then that is better that he should do. However, if he sticks to that, then the Quran says, then it has to be a divorce. So, in azamut talaq fa inna Allah samiyun alim. Wa, and in, if azamu, they decide. At talaq, divorce. Fa, therefore, inna, indeed, Allah, God, Sami'un, who listens, Alim, who is knowledgeable. So the word is that basically in those 4 months you have to decide. So either you resume your relations with your wife, and that is what God says, Inna Allah Ghafurur Rahim, that He is very forgiving and He is very merciful. However, at the end of that period, which is 4 months, if he does not like to, or he would not like to resume those sexual relations with his wife, then it is not proper to keep her waiting and in a limbo. He must divorce her. So it says, وَإِنْ عَزَمَ الطَّلَاقِ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. So therefore, now if you decide for divorce, then God is someone who hears and He knows everything. وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ. Wa, and al-mutallaqatu, divorced women. So this is a plural. So mutallaqa is the singular and mutallaqat is the plural. So wal mutallaqat would mean and divorced women. Yatarabbasna, should wait. Bi anfusihinna, upon themselves. Salasata, 3. Quru, menstrual cycles. Quru again is a plural. The singular is qar'un. So idiomatically the translation would be that divorced women should wait upon themselves for 3 menstrual cycles. Salasa is 3. Quru is menstrual cycles. Wa, and. La, not. Yahillu is allowed. Lahunna, to them. An, that. Yaktumna, they hide. Ma, what. Khalaqallahu, God has created. Fi, in. Arhamihinna, in their wombs. So arham again is a plural. Its singular is rahim, and it means the womb. So it is not permissible to them. Wala yahillu lahunna, it is not allowed to them. It is not permissible to them. An yaktumna, that they hide. Ma khalaqallahu, what God has created in their wombs. In other words, what it means is that they must not hide the child that might have been in their, or the child that is in their wombs. In kunna, if they, yu'minna, believe, billahi, in God, wal yawmil akhir, and in the hereafter. So these women, if they are pregnant, they must not hide their pregnancy if they are women who believe in God and in the last day. Wa, and. Bu'ulatuhunna, bu'ul is the plural of ba'al, and ba'al is a husband. So bu'ulatuhunna, and their husband. So this suffix that you can see is hunna. Hunna, you can see this hunna, you can spot this hunna. Bi anfusihinna, arhamihinna, ba'ulatuhunna. So hunna is a plural regarding, I mean, you can translate it as they, the third person, plural of the female gender. So ba'ulatuhunna would mean their husbands. Ba'ulatuhunna, and their husbands. Ahakku means they have more authority, or they are more, they have a greater right, so to speak. Biraddihinna, be, that. Raddihinna, again this hinna is the same as the hunna earlier on, which means them, and radda is to return, or to return them back. So these husbands have have a greater right to return them fi zalika, in this period of iddat, in aradu, in if aradu they intend, islaha, if they intend reformation, if they intend the mending of affairs, if they intend islah, which would mean that these husbands have a greater right to have them return to them in this iddat period if the intention is to reform matters. Wa, and lahunna, regarding them, mithlul similar, alayhinna, what is upon them, bil ma'ruf, according to the norms. So walahunna would mean for them is something what is upon them. This is a very, very interesting verse of the Quran. It's also very concise, but if you expand it, it means that just as they have obligations, lahunna would mean whatever is upon them, mislullazi alayhinna, is the same as is upon them, which means that just as they have rights, they have obligations. So lahunna mislullazi would mean they have rights the way they have obligations. Lahunna, so lahunna and alayhinna, these are two opposite words. Lahunna would mean for them are rights, and alayhinna would mean and they are rights which are owed to them. I mean, there are certain rights which they must discharge, and there are other rights which must be discharged towards them. So this is the construction, and you can clearly see it would mean that just as they have rights, similarly they have obligations. This is that more an idiomatic translation. Otherwise, literally it would mean that for them is what is against them, which would mean that for them, just as they have certain rights, so they have certain rights which should be discharged for them as well. So just as they have to discharge rights for others, others have to discharge rights for them. And of course, others here refers to their husbands. وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةٌ, wa, and lirrijal, for men. Rijal again is a plural, its singular is rajul. So lirijal would mean and for men. Again, the word men is referring to husbands. And for husbands, alayhinna, upon them. Remember, this hinna is the same as hinna before and hunna earlier on. Daraja means a degree. Wa, and Allah, God, Azizun, powerful, Hakim, wise. And for the husbands is a degree, and God is powerful and wise. Degree, of course, here means that they have a higher degree, and as husbands, because of the fact that they are the head of the family, so therefore this is what is stated here, that as husbands they have a degree of superiority over women. Of course, women here refers to wives. At-talaqu marratan fa imsakum bima'ruf aw tasrihum bi ihsan. At-talaqu marratan, this divorce, marratan, is twice. I mean, the divorce in which you can take back your wife within the iddat period, that is something which is a right that has been given to you, but you can exercise it just 2 times. So at-talaqu marratan, that this divorce can just happen 2 times. Marratan, 2 times. After that, fa imsakum bima'ruf aw tasrihum bi ihsan. Therefore, imsak is to hold back, bima'ruf, according to norms, aw is or, tasrihum would be sending off, bi ihsan, with kindness. So once this divorce takes place, the Quran says, I mean, once you reach the end of the waiting period, the iddat period, either you retain your wife, imsak means to retain, ma'ruf, norms. So either you retain her according to the norms, or tasrihum, you let her go bi ihsan, with kindness. Wala, and not, yahillu lakum, it is not permissible for you, that ta'khuzu, that you take back, mimma, what you ataytumuhunna, you had given her or you had given them, shay'an, even little bit. You see, this is what we have been discussing in the question earlier on. And the Quran says that it is not permissible for the husbands to take back anything from their wives, except that exceptional situation is coming up, and that is illa an yakhafa alla yuqima hudud Allah, except if both of them feel that they will not be able to abide by the limits of God. Illa, except, that yakhafa, they fear, Allah, that they will not, yuqima, be able to abide, hudud Allah, the limits of God. Fa in khiftum, So now the verse turns towards, the society and says that if you also fear this. Now, initially the husband and wife had this fear that they'll not be able to abide by the limits of God. And now the matter has come before the court of law. And if the court of law also feels, فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا يُقِيمَ حُدُودَ اللَّهِ, that they too will not be able to abide by God's limits, then فَلَا جُنَاهَ عَلَيْهِمَا, then there is no sin on them, alayhima, on them, fima, regarding iftadat bihi, she gives as ransom to him. Now this is that exceptional situation that we just discussed, that if the situation is this, that they would know, both of them know that they are not going to abide by this marriage, somehow they'll have to break it up. But now the situation is that the husband has gifted a lot of money or a lot of wealth or a lot of assets. So in this case, the Quran says if the wife takes back or gives back the husband a part of it, fi maftadat bihi, it's like saying that she was in ransom, and that ransom or that penalty is being given back to the husband simply because the divorce is not taking place. And the situation is that both of them want divorce, but the only thing stopping them is a lot of amount which is gifted by the husband to the wife. So it is now being said to them that in such an exceptional scenario, if the wife gives back those gifts, not the dower, just those gifts, in order to release herself, then it is fine. Otherwise, the husband does not have any authority to take back anything from the wife. Tilka hududullah. Tilka, these. Hudud, limits. Hudud again is a plural, it's wahid, or its singular is had. Allah, God. So these are the limits of God. Fala, so do not. Fa, therefore, la, not. Ta'taduha, cross them. Wa, and. Man, he. Yata'adda, crosses. Hudud Allah, God's limit. Fa ulaika, therefore they. Hum, are. This is like a double stress. Az-zalimun, the wrongdoers. So those who break the limits of God, those who pass or trespass, or those who exceed the limits of God, it is they who are the unjust. It is they who are wronging their souls. فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا فَلَا تَحِلُّ لَهُ مِن بَعْدُ حَتَّى تَنْكِحَ زَوْجًا غَيْرَهُ. Therefore, if طَلَّقَهَا, you divorce them. So remember, previously it was said that this divorce can only take place twice in one's life. But if you divorce them a third time, so now it is فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا would mean now you divorce them a third time. Fala, therefore not. Tahillu lahu. So if the husband divorces his wife, or if a person divorces his wife for the third time, although the word third is not mentioned here, but it is evident from the context, because the context has already said this, that this divorce in which you can take back your wife can only happen twice. So now automatically the next verse would mean that the husband has divorced his wife for the third time. So فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا, so if he now divorces his wife for the third time, فَلَا تَحِلُّ لَهُ, it is not permissible for him, مِن بَعْدُ, after this, hatta, until, tankiha, zawjan ghayra. So unless she weds a husband, hatta tankiha zawjan ghayrahu, she weds a husband which is other than his own husband, her own husband, which of course means that she contracts a second marriage. And then what happens is فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا, so therefore now the new husband divorces her once again. فَلَا جُنَاهَ, there shall be no sin, junaha, the sin, alayhima, on both of them. أَن يَتَرَاجَعَ, if yataraja, they turn back, which means they come together once again. If zanna, both of them think, that yuqima, they will abide by hudud Allah, God's limits. So you see, this verse says that now if the wife marries someone else and that person, out of any naturally arisen circumstances, divorces this wife, now if you would like to come back to the first husband, the Quran says, فَلَا جُنَاهَ عَلَيْهِمَا, there is no sin on both of them. The first husband and the first wife can now unite. Now there is no sin on them if they return to one another. Yataraja, if they return to one another, provided that they think that they'll be able to abide by the limits of God. Remember, initially the divorce had been taken place because they were not able to abide by these limits. Now, if they have to come back to each other, they must be reasonably sure that they'll not break these limits once again. So the Quran says, وَتِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ, and tilka, these hududullah are the limits of God. Yubayyinuha, which he explains, and what does he explain? لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ, to those who know. He explains these limits to those who know. So in other words, it says that وَتِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ, he explains these limits to those who have knowledge. Or, of course, here, because the person who have knowledge are ones who are seeking knowledge. So here, the verb actually would be in the meaning of its intention, that these are the limits of God, and he explains these limits for those who would like to know, who would like to understand, who would like to gain knowledge. Now, وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَبَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ فَأَمْسِكُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ سَرِّحُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. And إِذَا, when, طَلَّقْتُمْ, you divorce, النِّسَاء, your women, فَبَلَغْنَا, therefore they reach, balagna, they reach, ajalahunna, their period, their ending period, of course referring to the iddat period. Therefore, amsikuhunna, either you retain them, bima'ruf, according to the norms, or sarrihuhunna, let them go, bima'ruf, according to the norms. So idiomatically it would mean that once you divorce your wives and they reach their iddat period, you either retain them according to the norms, or you let them go, let them depart according to the norms. Wala, but, la, not. Tumsikuhunna, you must not stop them. Ziraran, intending harm. Lita'tadu, so that you cross limits. So in other words, you should not retain them with the intention of harming them. Wa, and man, he, yaf'alu, does, zalika, this, fa, therefore, qad, indeed, zalama, unjust, nafsah, to his soul. But he who does so is someone who is unjust to his soul. In other words, you should not retain women to harm them. But if a person retains these wives only to harm them, or her in that case, then this would be oppression, an instance of oppression, nafsahu, on his own self. He will be wronging his own soul. Wa, and, la, not. Tattakhizu, you make, ayatillahi, the verses of God, the revelations of God. So ayat is the plural of ayat. So ayat is the plural, which means God's verses. Huzwa means a means of mockery. So do not make the verses of God, the revelations of God, a mockery, which means that don't make fun of them by trying to abide by them in letter but not doing so in spirit. Va, and, uzkuru, bear in mind, ni'matallah, God's favor, alaykum, upon you. Allah is upon, kum is you. So uzkuru means bear in mind, remember. Ni'matullah, God's favor, alaykum, upon you. Wa, and, ma, what, anzala, he has revealed, alaykum, upon you, minal kitab, from the book. Min is from the book. Wa, and, al-hikmah, and the wisdom, ya'izukum bihi, of which he instructs you. So idiomatically the translation would be, and keep the favor of God in remembrance, the favor that he has done upon you, and what he has revealed to you from among the book and the wisdom. Of course, here it refers to the two components of religion. One of them is al-kitab, which is al-sharia, and the other one is al-hikmah, which refers to faith and morality. Ya'izukum bihi, so ya'izukum bihi, he instructs you of it, bihi, of it. Wa, and, ittaqullah, fear God, ittaqu, fear, Allah, God. Wa, and, i'lamu, so it's basically the word is i'lamu, but when you read it in unison with the previous word, it would be read as wa'lamu. So wa'lamu would mean you should know, anna, that, Allah, God, bikulli, about everything, shay'in, about every, sorry, shay'in is thing, alim, knowledgeable. So wa'lamu would mean you should know that God is knowledgeable about everything, or you should know that God has knowledge of everything. Wa, and, iza, when, talaqtumun nisa, when you divorce your wives, fa balagna, therefore, balagna, they reach, ajalahunna, they reach their, it means that their iddat has expired, they reach their term, fa, therefore, la, not, ta'duluhunna. Ta'duluhunna would mean to impede, to hinder them. So do not impede them, do not hinder them, do not stop them, that yankihna, that they should marry, Azwajahunna, their future husbands. So you see, this was an Arab custom, and it is a custom which still prevails, in which what happens is that because of this overblown honor, when you divorce a wife and the iddat period expires, you would not allow that wife to get married to another person, because you think that, well, she has remained my wife, and why should she now marry another person? So this is like something which was rampant in the Arab society, and the Quran has taken exception to it and said that this should not happen. So when you divorce your wives and they reach their iddat period, which means that their iddat has now expired, so now they are free women. فَلَا تَعْدُلُوهُنَّ. So therefore, do not impede أَنْ يَنْكِحْنَ أَزْوَاجَهُنَّ, that they marry their future husbands. إِذَا, when تَرَادَوْا, they mutually consent, بَيْنَهُمْ, among themselves, بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, according to the norm. So if they consent to marry one another, you should not cause any hindrance. ذَلِكَ, this, يُعَزُ بِهِ, God counsels you about it. And who does he counsel? Man, who kana, are, minkum, amongst you, yu'minu, who profess faith, billahi, in God, wa, and al-yawm al-akhir, the last day. So these are words of counsel which are given to those of you who believe in God and the last day. Zalikum, again this only. Azka lakum wa athar. Azka, something which is more pure. Lakum, for you. Athar, again something which is more decent and seemly. So wa, and Allah, God, ya'lamu, knows, wa, and antum, you, la, not, ta'lamun, no. So Zalikum askalakum wa athar will mean that this is something which is more pure and something more clean for you. And God knows and you do not know. So I'm going to stop here, and inshallah we'll continue with the literal and idiomatic translation of the remaining 10 verses in our next session. And now if you have any off-topic questions or on-topic questions, you can raise them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. There are quite a few questions. So, Adil Qureshi, why don't you go ahead before I sort out the chat questions?
Yeah, so regarding the on-topic questions, just one clarification I wanted, Dr. Saab, you said Yameen means oath, but the word
Yes.
Yameen does not mean the right side or right hand, or are they?
It has two meanings. It is a double meaning word.
Okay. So, sir, if we can move to the ayah 22-28, if you can move to the ayah
228?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Can you display, please, verse 228?
Yeah.
Is this
before that?
This is 231.
Okay.
Yeah. This is 230. I think 2 verses before that.
Yes.
This one.
So here, I mean, the people who object patriarchy and all, and you know how Quran proves it and all. Here you can see that where it says walahunna, walirijali alayhinna daraja, that men have preference above them. Now here the argument is that no, this is not talking about in general about men being better than women. This is talking about husbands given a preference over wives, but in general this is obviously not patriarchy or not an ayah about how men are better than women. The objection to that that is raised or comes to the mind is that Allah Almighty used the word rijal here. While in the same ayah, he was using the word ba'ulatuhunna. Ba'ulatuhunna is a very good word and apt word to be used for husband. He could have used the same word husband below as well, but he chose the word rijal instead of ba'ula. So he did not mean husband. But why are you translating this as husband?
You see, this is what we call the context and occasion which demands so. Remember the verse 434 which says, Ar-rijalu qawwamuna ala nisa. Literally, it would mean that men have been made heads of the heads or in charge of women. So the word barula or baal is not used there simply because it is understood. When I say someone who is living in your house or someone who belongs to you, so these are metaphorical words in which when you use the word man or when you use the word woman, they automatically imply wife and husband. And this has been the case in so many other verses that we have just studied. If you look at these verses in which says that do not stop women from marrying their future husbands. So it's not said that you do not stop your wives. The word is do not stop women. So you see, these words are used interchangeably, and it is the sense which is conveyed here that lets us know. So وَلِرِجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ daraja, if it means that men are superior to women, I mean, this would be an out of context translation, because what is being discussed is a husband and wife, the way the family is to be broken up, the way men and women, if they have to end their marriage, what should be the steps that are involved. So you see, the whole context from the previous verses, and even in the next one, is that of a family setup. So inserting something which is not in line with what this context says, it would be that you just sever the verse from its context, and you just pick up one part, and that is وَلِرِجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةٌ, that men they have a degree of superiority. So this would be something that would be against the context. But because there are people who bent upon they're interpreting the Quran out of context, then of course we cannot stop them. But just to try to focus their attention that you cannot change words simply because the Quran does not use specific word. This is a very, very common thing. I mean, I just gave you this example that ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala nisa, that men are in charge of women. However, the implication is that husbands are in charge of wives. But the word used is not husband, it is men. And in that case, the word used is not wife, but it is women.
Right. So in this ayah, so what you're referring to is that Rijal is kind of a stand-in for Baulatuhunna. Basically, they both meant the same thing.
Right.
Okay. And so what does this, so in practically speaking, what it says is that if the man wants to have the wife back, he has more preference that the wife goes ahead and remarries this man instead of another man. And
no,
what if
so see, when the iddat period has not expired, she does not need to marry him. He does not need to marry. All that he needs to tell her that is, I am taking back you as in marriage. The nikah is required. The nikah is only required had the iddat period expired. So this is talking about the fact that within the iddat period, a husband has the right to take her back within the iddat period, not after the iddat period, because after the iddat period, they are two separate individuals.
Okay, so after the iddat period, the woman has complete autonomy, and she may choose to remarry the man, or she may not choose to remarry the same man. But,
absolutely.
But during the iddat period, she does not have that kind of autonomy, and
unless, of course, she still has that autonomy. For example, if let us suppose that she does not wish to go back, then what she'll say is that, well, you have the right to take me back, but I'm not willing to come back, and I'm filing a divorce, which means that I am asking you to divorce me. So that would be a new procedural divorce that would then be initiated. But in this particular scenario, one divorce would be completed, and she would be counted, I mean, as a wife who has been taken back in that first divorce. So she will come back, and now the very next moment she can say, okay, as per the Quran, I'm now back, but now I want to get separated from you. So she will now have that procedure reinitiated.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I'm going to go a bit out of order for the following questions, but because they're related. So if the people have separated, the husband and the wife have been separated, do they have to undergo halala? Is that required, or is it only applicable after they have married and divorced each other 3 times?
I think I've answered this question previously as well, even today. I mean, the word halala is something which is alien to religion at all. I mean, what is halala? I mean, basically what it means in the conventional sense is that you plan for the wife who has received 3 divorces, that she undergoes 1 day of marriage, planned marriage with someone, and has intimacy with that person, and then you have an agreement with that person that he will divorce her the very next day, and then she will be legitimized for the first husband. This is what is called halala. And it has absolutely no foundation in religion. It's a subterfuge. It's a shameful practice that has been invented, I would say, or fabricated by not understanding the spirit and the whole directive of divorce.
And so in relations, thank you, Dr. Saleem. For those who want a further deeper explanation, check out last week's textual study of the Qur'an, where Dr. Saleem goes into about this in details. So the husbands having a degree above their wife, is this a generic comment, or is this specifically more about the unborn child if it is found during the iddat of the women's time, and if they try to take her back and she says that she wants to separate, will she be allowed to separate from him still?
I just answered this question that if he takes her back and then she still wants to separate and she does not want to come back, so what will happen is that yes, for this one instance, she'll come back to him and then she will say that now I no longer wish to stay with you and you give me a new divorce. So that would be a new divorce that she would initiate.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Next question asks, so the ayah is not to prevent them from marrying after iddah, is talking to the ex-husband and not their awliya.
Which ayah is she referring to? Is it the وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةٌ?
I'm not sure. They didn't say.
Okay, I just remember that I did not answer. I think I did not answer one part of the question, and that was that is that a generic statement or not? So let me also clarify this, that this is not a generic statement of any superiority. All it tells us is that the husband have a degree of I mean, it's like saying that he has a degree of further responsibility as the head of the family. So what effectively this verse is saying, that when you're living in a family, the two in case of a deadlock, one opinion has to prevail. So which opinion is the one that has to prevail in case of a deadlock, in case of the fact that in spite of resolving that deadlock, nothing could be resolved? So the Quran says the person who is given the head of the family is the person who is made in charge of the financial expenses of the family, as well as because of the fact that he is more naturally and physiologically akin to become the head of the family. So it is in this status that he is said, that a husband is said that he has a degree of superiority. It's like saying, I mean, to give you a more general example, that if the president of a country and the citizens, they are equal in their status as citizens, but because he is the head of the state, so he has a degree of superiority in the sense that he is governing his citizens. But this does not make the citizens lesser individuals in their human sense. So in a very similar way, this verse is telling us that in case of a husband and wife, both are equal in their human stature, but a husband has been made responsible for certain things, and therefore, in that sense, he has a degree of superiority, just as a head of state has a degree of superiority over the citizens that he is governing, not in the sense that he's a better human being, but in the sense that he is now governing them. So it is this governing position which is called as daraja.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We're going to take one off-topic questions and then come back to the remaining, depending on how much time we have. So this is related to hadith literature, and this one asks, why should we get these inspirations from a source, akhbar ahad, which is not certain? The information in hadith is probable and not certain. Is this not building a castle with a weak foundation?
The fact is, if the foundation is weak, we should not build a castle at all. But what if the foundation is reasonably okay? I mean, if it goes in the light of the Quran, if it's reported with I mean, authenticity. So if it is, there is a very, very high likelihood of the fact that it is what the Prophet had said. So why shouldn't we benefit from that? Especially when we are not making a part of law. We are not taking it as a foundation of religion, because you see, hadiths do not form any foundational authority in religion. So it's like something that you, I mean, derive from them. So they are always placed in a state in which you can draw a conclusion from them, you can benefit from them, but they never ever have the position of a foundational authority.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We'll take one more question and we'll see from there. Noshaba Wasim, please go ahead.
Assalamualaikum, sir. Sir, my question is why there is a 3-period mentioned, or like if after one period, you can find if the woman is pregnant or not. So why there are 3?
Well, I think that even if you ask doctors of today, that there are instances in which even after one period of menstrual cycle, there have been instances in which pregnancy has been reported because of some anomalies. That has been the case. So basically, in those times, because there was no reason, there was no provision to find out that certainty of pregnancy. So it was like a precaution of 3 menstrual cycles that was taken, because this would ensure, this would be like 100% guarantee that she is not pregnant. Because as I've just said, that there are instances even after 1 menstrual cycle and at times after 2, in which pregnancy or a late pregnancy has taken place, or maybe it has been detected late. So you see, detection is also one thing. So in order to circumvent all these possibilities and probabilities and ruling them out, it was like a extra precaution that the Quran took.
Mhm. And sir, the verse which we mentioned that if it's a iddat period, the husband can contact his wife again and they can live together. So
Right.
after even a third divorce, there in a iddat period, there is a chance they can live together, or it's
No,
a
no, no, no. In that case, they are not required to live together. This is just for the first two divorces. But in
uh-huh.
that case, the husband would still be required to give her maintenance and residence, which would mean some other residence. But they would not be required to live together because now there's no chance of any reconciliation unless, of course, she marries someone else. And then, as I said, the procedure is followed.
So if they gather after two divorce, so if they gather again, so that if the next time the divorce will happen, so it start again from the one, or it's the
Yes,
count.
once they come back to one another, the divorce, the chances of divorce will start from one once again because now it's a new marriage contract.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We're all out of time and we have quite a few more questions left, so I would request the participants to hold on to them either until the next class or until the next Islam Study Circle or Ask Dr. Saleem, so you could ask those more general questions or questions related to today's topic. But since we're all out of time, we'll have to end here today. Thank you all so much for coming here and participating and asking great questions. And thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, for answering all these questions and teaching us weekly. May Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakumullah khairan.